Good evening, everyone. I'm David Sproles, the president of the New York School of Interior Design, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's program. We are fortunate this evening to be hosting three venerable designers on the NYSID stage. With 4 decades of experience in New York's design industry, Carl Dellatore, has established himself through his work in textile design as a workroom owner and as an author. Over the last decade, Carl has produced 5 books for Rizzoli, including his latest, just-released book, Interior Design Masterclass, 100 Rooms, in which Carl has selected, guess what, 100 rooms to celebrate. Drawing from his book, Carl will explore how contemporary designers are blending timeless principles with innovation in 21st century interiors with his peers, architect and decorator Robert Couturier, and designer Ghislaine Viñas. Robert, a Paris-born, New York-based AD100 Hall of Fame architect and decorator, has been lauded for his ability to whimsically combine antiques with modern elements. An ELLE Decor A-lister, Ghislaine is likewise known for the novel materials and playful compositions she brings to a breadth of work spanning product design to hospitality. If you haven't already, you will have a chance to pick up a signed copy of Carl's book after the talk. So please join me and welcome our panelists. Come on up. Hey.
So how do you start?
Thank you, David. Ghislaine Robert. Thank you, everybody, for coming. As David mentioned, this is my 5th book for Rizzoli in 9 years. My goal when I started this work in publishing was to do 10 books in 20 years, so I'm on track. And as David mentioned, this book is titled 100 Rooms. The idea was, at the quarter century mark, we're a quarter of the way into the 21st century now, I picked, over the course of months and months, as my editor Kathleen, who is here, would attest, 100 rooms that I think represent where we are in the decorative arts in America. And Robert has a room in this book which is very lively and red, and he wrote about the subject of mixing patterns. Ghislaine has an equally beautiful room, slightly more austere, but very lively, and she wrote about the idea of mixing silhouette. So we're going to talk about those ideas tonight. So I guess, as David suggested, you were born in Paris and you were born in the Netherlands. And so I wonder what sort of cultural influences remain in your life as you work in America and in interior design?
I think that the most important lesson that we learned from our education and our history is a form of fidelity to the past to a degree, and to know where things come from and to take the basic and then maybe change it, but to be respectful of whatever's been before us. And then you can do whatever it is that you really want, but there's a certain form of strictness that comes from that. And then you have to leave your own fantasies that will go with it.
And Ghislaine?
Well, I think, I was born in the Netherlands, and then I grew up in South Africa, and then I came here when I was 18, and I think just that kind of feeling of always being somewhat of a foreigner or in another country, I think has it kind of lets you observe things, and I think it's also, New York is so filled with people from all over, so it's not that unusual. We're all from somewhere fascinating and interesting, but I think that it does let you sort of stand apart from everybody else, because I think that heritage is a strong thing. And I think for me, my Dutch heritage, my DNA is definitely, I kind of feel that it goes back to my Dutch roots in use of color and use of just a sort of playful kind of naughty sort of attitude towards design. So I think that probably comes through in my work, but it's something that I do very organically and sort of have, noticed that I do that.
Mm-hmm. And so, Rebecca, this idea that you mix what's old and new together, is that somehow rooted in French culture?
Well, it is, because everything that is inherited is basically included in the houses in which we live. So you find yourself with things that belong to your grandparents or great-grandparents or wherever, and it's just sort of so traditionally something that we live with, that we are all sort of raised with that sense of history and a certain respect of history. And I think whatever we have that's old or antique is a reminder of things past, and it's a memory and a respect you have to people who were preceding you. But I think also using things that are antiques, I think, gives structure in many ways, and I think gives a sense of history to whatever rooms you do. And it could be an antique from 20 years ago. I'm not saying that it has to be 2,000 years old, but it's rooted in your personal history. And I think this is what makes your spaces personal spaces, which I think is quite important.
Do you find that to be true as well?
Well, it's so interesting because we probably could not come from different, you have that deep history and that which is something that I've actually learned in my later years to kind of appreciate and sort of hone. But for me, it was just, I think, trying to be contemporary in a world where I felt like, if coming to New York for the first time, I felt that there was so much traditional design and there wasn't very much contemporary design. And so I felt like that my design was initially sort of perceived as being maybe a little childlike or not sophisticated. And I do think that, in the 20, 30 years that I've been working, I think that I have developed a more, distinct and more sophisticated style than when I started out. But I think it's so interesting because I was trying everything not to be traditional, to try and be very contemporary and sort of entertain that and try and create a portfolio that showed that, where I think it's lovely and fascinating.
It's the reason to put people like you together, because the conversation is really interesting, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. We'll try not to have any arguments.
Not to be any.
So we just were talking about how we're at the first quarter century of the 21st century, and I was wondering what both of you thought about how design has changed since, say, 2000, 25 years later. What's changed in the United States? I mean, I remember once having a conversation with the late David Easton about dining rooms have disappeared, and that offices had, by and large, disappeared, and that men's ties had disappeared. So I wonder what your perspective is on how design has changed in these 25 years.
It's really weird because 25 years seems like yesterday.
It does.
I think for me, it's just a matter of experience. I think that I wouldn't do today what I did 25 years ago. I don't think anyone would. I think that what has changed in the design world is a certain form of uniformity that is now sort of the common thread. I mean, you don't have any more, when I grew up, you had particularly design that was particular to your country, particular to your social class, particular to all these sorts of things. They were very, very precise and very different from one to the other. And everybody designed in that particular vernacular, which now is no longer in existence, and people who live could have an apartment in Dubai and one in New York and one in London and one in Paris, and it's all the same. Whereas before it wasn't that way. You never had the same apartment in Paris as you had in New York. My grandmother lived here, so I remember coming to New York as a child, and a New York house had nothing to do with a French house or an English house. And today, it's all the same. The furniture is the same, the layouts are the same. There's always a kitchen, dining room, and living room in the same room. There's always, you know, sort of this sort of plainer kind of surrounding as we once had. And I think the interest that people had in actually beautiful objects and beautiful things has waned a great deal, because today what is valued is art, and not very much furniture, not very much decorative arts. And so when you have a big apartment, somebody is incredibly successful, what you have is basically white furniture and Rothkos on the walls, which is completely fine. But then one apartment is the same than the other, and you go up and down Park and Fifth and Greenwich and everything, and all the houses look the same. And it's very difficult for you to convince people to do something different, because it's the way it is. So I think that's a big change, I find.
That democratization of design that I sort of trace back to the advent of the internet, and that we all had access to so much pluralistic information, and it all got melded together. And as you say, I think it's tricky, because sometimes your aesthetic is incredibly different. I wouldn't think of your work as sort of falling into a pigeonhole. What's your thought?
Well, I think that might have been very difficult for me in the beginning, because as you're, building up your portfolio over the decades, you kind of, you don't really know what you kind of know what your style is, but you're at the mercy of the projects that you do to be able to create a portfolio and show your work and develop as a designer. So I think that even though that was it made it more difficult in the beginning, I think that ultimately I have been able to create a style that is very unique to my personal DNA, and I sort of work from my gut, and so I think that has been very helpful in what you're saying, because I think clients come to me knowing that they're going to get something different, and they are going to be design off-roading, and it's not going to be, so already like, I sort of, I don't get many clients who we're looking at 3 or 4 different designers. I already know that that's not going to be great. I'm always looking for those people that come to me and say, we can't imagine anybody else to work with. You're that person. I'm like, okay, let's go. Then I know that it's going to be a good fit, and then people are ultimately looking for that thing that I think that I do well, which is a little different from everybody. But it takes so many years of what's different in design, in the last 25 years or something. And yes, so many things have changed, obviously. But I think for me, I also, I was saying before that I used to look at traditional design and try and remove myself from that. And now for the last 10 years or so, I find myself just delving and looking into all these gorgeous interiors that I would not be able to design, and it's not what I'm looking to do. But oh my God, there are so many treasures and so many things to riff off and to look at in history, and just a different designers who do their craft so well. So I think it's become more open-minded, and just being able to look at a broader scope of what's out there, and appreciate that and love it.
So on the subject of clients, I wanted to talk with you both, thinking about the students in the room. What is it that you're looking to ascertain when someone contacts you and says, we'd like you to do our interior? What are some of the first things you're trying to figure out from them?
That they're not a-holes.
But sometimes, it's very difficult, because we all have to respond to the hard necessities of life. So sometimes, you find yourself in a position in which you can't really choose who you're going to work for. And sometimes somebody comes to you, and when that person walks into the office, going to be a disaster. Because that person doesn't really want what you have. They want who you are, they want the people you know, they want all sorts of things that are not things that you want to give, particularly, especially somebody you have no idea who they are. And so, and you have to accept it, and that's incredibly complicated. And I've always found in all the years that I've been in business that accepting a client whom you know is not going to be a good one is an enormous mistake, because it all ends up in catastrophe. And I've had many catastrophes in all my, my life as an interior designer. And I'm not saying that I won't do it again, but I think that it's something that we have to respond to. We have offices, we have bills to pay, we have all of those things that make it necessary. Ideally, the client that you want is the person who you really get along, and you feel that you know them, and you're going to know them, and you're going to love them, and you're going to be sharing an adventure with them, and it's a wonderful thing. And that's the biggest present that you can have. But it doesn't always happen, and you can't expect it to happen at every client. And it's just, it's just a business of life that you just have to go on.
Yeah, I agree with Robert. I think it's incredibly basic on so many levels that you just, you meet these people and you're like, oh my God, I love these. They're just nice. They're so nice. Like, I know that I have some clients that I'm really, really, really incredibly lucky that so many calls that I finish with my clients. We do a lot of Zoom in my office, and I'm just like, oh my God, I love these people. They're so nice.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, sir.
It's that people say to you, you should never work with a friend. And I think it's the biggest mistake you can make for our business, because I think our business is to be friends with the people you work for. Otherwise, how are you going to know them? And I've had clients for 40 years who've been friends since we were kids, and who are, at least, the sort of time that it takes to know a person vanishes, because you know that person. And it's so pleasant to have a completely open conversation about things that are so private. And that person isn't going to hide themselves particularly, because they know you, you know them, you've known them forever. And that's a great present. And the people you don't know, you try to have that with them, it doesn't always work.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just, and you do become friends with not all your clients, but you do become, it slips into these, and it's very organic. So it's not like, oh my God, like, let's just try and, keep these two things separate. I feel like, I also feel like the clients are very respectful of understanding what is social and what is work. And I find that clients are very, very understanding of and respectful of that. So, yeah, I think you just know. And, I also know that if it's not working out, you kind of feel it. And I think I can be quite honest with a client and say, I'm not sure this is working out. I just don't think I'm doing a great job for you, and I'm this is taking a long time, and maybe, how can we kind of like go our own ways, and you feel like you did get something from me because you have paid for these services, and I can, and so I think that it doesn't happen very often, but if you can nip it in the bud and sort of go your own way, it's definitely a good thing to do. And it doesn't have to be done in a resentful way. I think it can just be done in a, if you let it fester, it can become really not so good. But I think you got to really, you got to like just trust your gut and go, I don't think that I'm doing the best job for this person.
I must say, I can't face it. I just ask my secretary to fire the client. And that's all I do, and then I disappear. And then it ends up in a lawsuit.
Oh, but you're not only professional, but you have this is an emotional business, right? And who really wants to, I mean, I won't say that every single person who's been in my 5 books has been a charming person to work for, right? Or to work with. As a rule, I've had a really positive experience, but like you guys, I mean, at the end of the day, if you do, and that's a really interesting way to couch it, to say, I don't feel like I'm doing the best work for you.
Yeah.
Because then you take responsibility in a way for it not working out.
I do genuinely feel that way though, because I'm like, I'm wasting this person's money. You know,
I wish I had that courage.
It feels frustrating. It just feels frustrating when you're not clicking and you're showing somebody stuff and they're like, and it's like, this is never gonna work. I'm not gonna be happy. You're not gonna be happy.
I hate it. Oh.
Yeah.
Happens a lot.
It happens a lot. So, going back to the book for a minute, and I suppose I was supposed to do this at some point. There it is, that's the cover. Robert, you write about mixing patterns, and I remember several years ago we had a conversation about color, and the idea that you discussed going to the Frick, back when it was still the Frick, now it's back to...
The painting's in the same place.
Yeah, it's in this, the paintings are in the same place. The Veronese is at the end of that green room,
Gallery.
and how the colors in that room made no sense at all. In those paintings, made no sense at all. But at the end of the day, they worked for you. And your suggestion at that point in time, if I remember correctly, was that you needed to understand the basics of color and then go on to break the rules. Is it also true about pattern?
Yes. I think that it's also very instinctive, because in many ways it comes from what you've seen. And I think I cannot encourage people enough to look at things, because you learn so much from just looking, and things that you like and patterns that you like. And they're not always, it's very often counterintuitive, but you just know that it works, and you have to trust yourself and not doubt your taste, because if you doubt it, you will make the wrong decision. And it's just that, okay, this works together. It's not supposed to work together, but it does. I don't know why. I don't know what balance, what makes it work, but it does work that way. And you have, and it's more interesting, which is why I think contemporary design is sometimes so dry, is that you have everything is the same color, or the same shade, or the same everything. And it's so not like the way that we live. I think we ourselves have a color. Just to be the only thing of color in your house is very weird. I think that, we respond to colors, which is, you can't live in a chalkboard. I mean, it's very, I find it very, very odd. But, I understand people who do it, and I think to each his own, but I don't think I would ever be able to function that way.
So I hear you saying it's about seeing things, but also intuition, and they have to find equilibrium.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there is no, as you know, for your work, there is no sort of recipe. You can't say you're going to have a blue grid with a yellow splash. It's just whatever will work the moment that it will work. And also you change. So at certain time in your life, you prefer some things versus others, and you have to listen to your client. And the client often doesn't know what they want. Remember, I had a client one day who was doing a house for her in the country, and she said, well, I want everything to have flowers. And I said, okay, flowers, good. And flower in the country, how innovative. And I said, well, you should look. And then she came back the next week and says, well, thank God you told me to look. I hate flower fabrics. And it's just, I don't know.
It is kind of interesting that I sometimes look at a room that I've done, and I think to myself, I would never have done this room like this, but it ended up like this because of that client, right? So sometimes you're like, that's not the greatest, but then you just kind of remember that you're providing a service, and if that person is like so happy and really loves that, and you can go, like that would have been maybe my 24th choice of things to do. I could have, but that's what makes every project different and interesting and intriguing. And I think it also makes us stronger designers in a way, because we have to work with those parameters. I love when a client brings something to me like that's really strange, or I love flowers, or I love birds, or I love whatever it may be, and we're like, oh my God, I'd never really thought of doing that. Or they bring something to the table that I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be so fantastic. This is a very traditional element, and this is going to be so amazing to incorporate and to maybe turn it upside down or look at it a little differently and to incorporate it into a more contemporary space. I think that's what makes the work really interesting, and what keeps it interesting as well. My mom just said to me, oh, you used to be much more contemporary than you are right now. And I'm like, yeah, but it gets really boring to do the same thing. Like the more theatrical you can be in a way with interiors, I think the more fun it is, and the more you can kind of keep yourself energized and keep things interesting.
In the kindest sense of that word, theatrical, I think of both of you having sort of theatrical interiors. It's emotional. I recognize your work, and I certainly recognize your work and the joy that both of you bring to it. I'm going to put you on the spot, Robert, before we go on to silhouette. Do you have a favorite textile in the marketplace right now, thinking about pattern? And mine is always the same, Tibet from Clarence House.
What is yours?
Tibet. Oh. It's the lions in the grow point, and I like the gray and yellow colorway.
I don't think I have a favorite fabric or color. I think it depends on your mood, really. And I think that you have so much more to choose from today, and so many more patterns and so many more textures that we once had. And so I think to sort of have one thing that's your favorite to a degree, almost, and also it limits you, and it's not something, when someone comes to you, and you just have to listen to what they really, really want, because it's not your house, it's theirs.
Right.
So it's, my choices are my own, but they don't have to be shared with the people I work for.
So on to the subject of mixing silhouettes. I reread your piece again today in the book, and you talk about the idea that seat height should remain uniform while everything else should be in flux. Do I have that correct?
Well, I say that, and I say that seat height, for me, it's important that, and if you're not going to keep your seat height at the same height, I think it should be very deliberate. But that's a very personal opinion that I have, and I can guarantee that not everybody is going to agree with me. But for the work that I do, I think proportion is incredibly important. So for me, if I'm going to change seat heights, then I need it to be a very, very deliberate, kind of thing that you do. I think that you can create silhouettes are very interesting to create moods and to create, you can be very dramatic in incorporating taller chairs or even backs that are interesting. To me, there's lots of things that you can do, but if you're working, if I'm working with a lot of, like pattern and color, those are very intense things, elements, and so something has to give. It's like going to a party and everybody's crazy. That's not really fun. You want to have some boring people and some wacky people, and so I think that's the balance is what it's all about. So like if you're yes, but I am known in the office to make sure that seat heights are 17 and a half or 18, or even if they're 16, and coffee tables to be 2 inches lower than that, and because that makes me kind of comfortable. But you know, that's not everybody's recipe for what they do.
You also write about the idea that rectilinear forms, say Joseph Frank sofa, juxtaposed against something bulbous or curvaceous.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love like seeing those shapes in a room and just being able to sort of squint your eyes and then look at the silhouettes that you've created, you know. That's like one element. That's almost like, you know, everything to me relates back to sort of a painting in a way. Like when you're creating a painting and you're balancing color here and here. Not that it needs to be the same color, but the chroma needs to be so that it's not, the room's not heavy. And then looking at scale and silhouettes and how those kind of all interact. And it's not one thing, it's like 10 of those elements all thrown into a room and making sure they balance. The room that I have in the book that you included, that honestly is a room that I don't think I've ever worked as hard on a single room as that room, getting every single element of every single piece of furniture was so carefully selected there. Every single fabric and shape and silhouette and pattern and everything that was so, you know, we tried so many different things before we settled on that. I mean, you don't know the history behind a room and how long it's taken, but that is a very carefully, you know, curated room, I think.
So we'll go to mistakes for a minute. What's the most common mistake people make when mixing patterns, Robert?
I think that people make a mistake when they are excessively deliberate. And I think that it becomes too recherché, too sort of, you know, complicated. Whereas I think that to have something that's instinctive, I think is a much better solution than to just, you know, sort of think that blue should go with purple or whatever it is. And I think at the end of the day, I agree with you, because I think that when whatever it is that you do it very carefully, and it doesn't appear careful in the way that the room is finished. But I think in our minds, I think we've worked for long enough to really have that grid in our minds that makes us choose certain things over others, because we have the experience that we have. And I think when I was much younger, I think I made probably infinitely more mistakes than I do make today. I'm sure I make some today too. But I think that experience is one thing that avoids mistakes, frankly. And modesty too, you know, sort of.
And on mixing silhouettes, what do people get wrong?
I don't know about mixing silhouettes. I mean, yes, I can speak about that. You know, I think it's kind of interesting what Robert says about, I think it's super fascinating, that the way that you work is so instinctive. And even though I also work instinctively, I think it's not the same. I think we work very, very differently. We come from so, you know, our starting point is so different. But I do see sometimes very garish use of colors that doesn't appeal to me. Whether I can call it a mistake, I don't know. Some people love it. So I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Maybe a mistake is a bad word under the circumstances, because design is so subjective.
I think it's like, I can definitely see some interiors or see things where I just don't like it. Where there just looks too much chroma in a room, or too, I don't know. But you know, as I said, like if somebody else looks at that in the room and goes, I love it, then who am I to say, you know, it's a mistake? Maybe I don't want to be in that room, but somebody else does, you know. I think that's always...
Yeah, and I think also things that are a little too studied. And I think the tendency that one has when one is younger is to be too studied, because you're very afraid of what you're going to do, the impact you're going to have, and so you are very careful. And I think with age, I think we've been, you know, that you don't have to be that careful, because it's also that people expect you to do certain things, not like everybody else. So I think it's, I think it works that way.
This brings us to the idea of learning from other people. And as I've mentioned, the book has 100 rooms in it. And we studied those rooms and tried to come up with what I might like to learn from the designer that I was asking to write. So it was sort of a painstaking process. But Bunny Williams, for example, we asked her to write about curtains because I think every room Bunny Williams has ever done has the most marvelous curtains and window treatments. So I asked her to tell me about that, and 99 other people. How important it is for both of you to look at other people's work? We've touched on this a bit, but studying what other people are looking at, what other people, and how does that inspire you?
I think it's hugely important. I mean, I grew up in a house that was done by Jean-Michel Franck, and so we had everything that I was so used to looking in the way that his aesthetics functioned that I think it gave me an aesthetic that was slightly, maybe sometimes too demanding, because my grandfather used to say that Jean-Michel Franck was somebody who designed very expensively empty rooms. And it was always, you know, the sort of, and so it gives you a certain demanding eye at what you're looking at, that it has to be, to a degree, you know, satisfyingly beautiful. That doesn't have to be excessively expensive. It doesn't have to be particularly refined, but it has something that has an element of beauty in it. And I think the privilege that we have to work in the business that we have is that that's what we do. We try to deal with beauty and to give beauty to the people who come to us as much as we can in our, you know, limited vocabulary probably, but just to try to do that.
And so you look at other people's work as well.
Oh my God, yes. And I think the book is so intriguing in that way because, I mean, there are so many different opinions and styles, and everybody in that book just really is very talented. Whether I love all those rooms, no, but do I look at them and can I appreciate every single room there and what they're doing? Absolutely. And you learn so much by looking. I think when I was younger, I used to just go, oh my God, that is not for me. Like, like, what are they doing? And now I look at that and go, wow, that is interesting. Look at what they've done on that bed, or look at the detailing on this, or look at the trim on this. I would never think of doing that. Or look at this. And now I think I'm just so much happier instead of just kind of thinking, oh, that's not for me. I'm just intrigued by all of it. And I think it's taken, I think that for me, learning to be a designer and to be better and better is just like, you know, learning a language. You know, when you learn a language at first, you're like, you know a couple of words, and then you're stringing together vocabulary, and maybe then you're learning your tenses, and then you're learning to have a conversation, and then you learn to write poetry, you know, and then you really, like, you can play with the language. And if you can be funny in a language, that's always for me, like when you learn a language and you can actually be funny, you know, you've mastered that language. And I think that's where I am right now. Like, I can look at other people's work and really and truly just be like, wow. That's such an interesting combination. I hate it, but wow, isn't it interesting?
Yeah. But Robert, you mentioned the word humility. That's what's required to really get to a place where you can look at other people's work and appreciate it exactly as it is, without some sort of didactic negative comment, right?
And also the consideration of time, you know, of all the centuries that have preceded us, all the things that have been designed, that nothing is all that new, that nothing, you know, chairs always had four legs. I mean, it's something that you have to look, and all the different cultures and the different interest in different aesthetics. I think the beauty of it is that the world has so much to offer that you limit yourself to one thing isn't good. I mean, that doesn't mean I could do, a Japanese interior, although, I look at them with fascination, but it's an aesthetic that doesn't belong to me. And so it's very interesting to learn about it and to get into it and to understand why certain colors are chosen over others and what do they mean and how do you use them, and something we wouldn't do in the West. So I think the advantage of this common world that we live in is that we have access to everything.
Yeah.
And
so how much time do you spend on Instagram looking?
a lot.
I do too.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's part of my work in that I'm constantly looking for something that's interesting and then sort of chronicling it away for a book. But
I think those home tours are also really interesting because you can really understand how people live, and you kind of. I think it's so interesting. Photography is one thing and it's fantastic, but when you're walking through spaces and you understand how one space leads to another. I mean, we're all voyeurism is.
That's what I think
is a wonderful thing.
Stacy Bukes and Quintessence really hit on something there with doing those at home with videos where you actually go and walk through someone's house, because it's definitive. A still photograph doesn't convey what someone walking through a space will convey to you, let alone the emotion people have when they're talking about their spaces and their homes. Notable rooms from the book. I asked you both to think about one room in the book other than your own that you learned something from. Can you tell me about that?
Well, I think it was sort of interesting to go through the book and look at that, and there were actually many that I really loved, but one that really, really stuck out was actually, it's on the cover. It's actually the middle bottom one. It's by Jane Hallworth.
Jane Hallworth, yeah.
And that room in particular, I think, is just brilliant. The topic that she was covering was white rooms. And I think that room in particular has just such an interesting curation of objects where she's not really focusing on a lot of color, but the furniture there's a 70s dining piece and chairs that kind of slide into each other, that fireplace, it's a little recessed red bit, there's a Carl Hansen sofa, there's a chandelier that has these beautiful butterflies on it. I mean, that is in my mind, an exquisitely executed room, even if it's not like comfy and, I think that room is really, really, really exquisite. And I admire the curation of that room.
How about you, Robert?
I have to say that every single one, I think you learn something from. I think it's, and surprisingly, I mean, every single one is something I look at them and I say, oh my God, I wouldn't be able to do that. And I think it's that point is that we all have a different language, that we all use differently, we all use different words, and it makes every single image, interesting by themselves. I don't know if there's one that I particularly, and I was thinking about that this afternoon, thinking I have to be clever about it. But I don't think there's one that sort of I would prefer over the other. A lot of them that I think I would have loved to have done, but no, I think it's wonderful. Also, it's a study books, which I think for students is so remarkable, because you can study the book and it teaches hugely, because it's 100 different pair of eyes, and I think that's priceless.
I don't necessarily, obviously I can't say that I have a favorite room in the book, because then I'll have 99 disgruntled people and one really good friend. But if I were to back up a book, and I could probably get away with that to my first Masterclass book, Celeste Cooper wrote about the idea of problem solving, and I still sort of think of it. There are many essays across the books that I produce where I learn something, But Celeste, her argument in that essay was that design is ultimately a problem-solving exercise, that it all comes down to answering a question. Do you think that's true? No.
I don't know. I think that it would be too prosaic, I find. I think it's, I like the aesthetics. I like the different aesthetics that we all have and getting into it. I think you can look at an Elsie de Wolf room and you have 15 little tabourets that are just everywhere. And then there's the use of furniture and the use of color, which I don't know it has anything to do with practicality. I think, and also practicality changes. You know, I mean, an 18th century room was practical in 1772, but I'm not sure that the same room today would be equally as practical. I think it's all, but the aesthetics are valid, whichever times they are. And I think it's, I think looking at rooms is an experience in modesty too, and accepting to learn from others. And that you don't have the solution to all the problems, and that sometimes people do things that are remarkable and that you wouldn't have done. So,
well, I think it's problem solving in that that's how you start every project. Really, you have you're creating that skeleton of what the requirements are, the rooms, understanding how people live, and it's that sort of really practical aspect of trying to figure out what the home requires and how your clients live and who lives there and are there dogs and are there cats and all of that. So I think that is the problem solving part. And then the other problem solving is also trying to understand who your clients are and what it is that they like about your aesthetic and your work, and how you can translate that DNA into, we sort of create narratives for our projects once we have figured out all of that, and that narrative is often from understanding who the clients are, the history of the house, what history of the family, whatever, and we create these sort of cornerstones and these visual elements that we keep on referring back to, so that those are the ingredients of that house, and it makes us look in different historic directions. And so, I mean, that's kind of, I suppose that is a sort of problem solving in that what is the narrative and what is the storytelling that we're going to do, and who are the characters and what are we picking for this project. So, and then it's a lot of just letting yourself go and not being so problem solving, but just being more organic about what you love and that sort of thing. And I think that our jobs are sort of part, there's a lot of business, and then there's a lot of fun as well. It's,
And then you have sometimes the illusion that we are working to do a beautiful house when the person is only preoccupied by housing 200 Kelly bags or her fur coats, and then the problem, and you think you do the jobs, and at the end it looks so beautiful, and then you get screamed at because the fur coats get crushed in the closet because it's not deep enough. And is that really something that matters? But it's just, we think we do something very glorified, and sometimes it's not. It's just putting, enough drawers to fit underwear, and not choosing a particularly gorgeous Louis XV piece of furniture. So we would love to think only about that, but one of my first clients, I remember, she was asking me, she said, "Do you know anything about closets?" And she's like, "Excuse me? Closet? No." I don't. It's not something that I was ever taught to think about, or, it's just like, okay, why? You can think about color.
Well, there's someone else to manage it, right?
Well, at the end of the day, you are the designer, and the client goes to you, so you have to answer, and you have to learn about it. Then you learn, and then you do it, and you do the practical thing as well as the not so practical, but the more emotionally satisfying.
On the subject of Elsie de Wolf, good segue. I asked Robert and Ghislaine to think about if we, the three of us, were going to dinner after this conversation tonight and we could have three people come with us, each choosing someone, who would they be from the design world, either here or not, and why would you want them to be there?
I think I would take Henri Samuel.
Who?
Henri Samuel, who's was, you know, the greatest French designer of the 60s. And I always admired his work with mixing ultra-modern pieces. He's the one who launched ELLE and all these sorts of people. And the mixture of the very grand and the not so grand and the very modern and edgy colors and unexpected. And I think he was an incredible designer with, you know, to whom I have immense respect. I think the work that he's done is quite remarkable. Also, we have to have the modesty to know that the work that we do will be destroyed eventually. You know, it doesn't stay. It's very temporary.
Hopefully not terribly temporary. Who's coming?
Dorothy Draper.
Okay.
I think she was just a
Yeah.
brilliant. I love that this was a woman.
It's such an interesting, because now suddenly when you say that, I see it. Because the Greenbrier, in a weird way,
Yeah,
is
I mean-
kaleidoscopic.
I mean, when I first discovered her, I was like, oh my God, like this woman was just, she was doing something so radically different from other people. And she was, you know, it was so graphic, and she plays with scale, and she looks like she's really having fun, you know, where we're not sure that fun came into a lot of dialogues when she was doing it, but she was, I think she said, if it looks right, it is right, right? Which is
Yeah.
kind of so fascinating with how she said that, and I love her confidence. I just love what she stood for at the time that she was working, and how impressive a portfolio she had as a woman. You know, I think she's remarkable, and I'd also like Pippi Longstockings to join because she's not an icon in our interior design world, but I think I think she's a fascinating character who we all have a lot to learn from.
And so I guess if I was thinking about this today, I go back and forth with who would be at this dinner with us. But I only had a few experiences with Mario Boada, but I'd like him to be there. Maybe because of the telescoping cockroaches. There's part of that, because if you knew him, he had a cockroach on a telescopic thing, and he was always cracking people up. But you know, the generosity of spirit I had in working with him when he was here. He wrote about color in my first Masterclass book, and we'd met at the Design 200 Lex building in the cafe there several times. And I don't remember ever laughing so much.
He's the same.
And I don't remember ever he had a definitive point of view, but at the same time was curious and interested in what other people were doing. When that book came out, I still have it on my phone and on my computer. When my first book came out, he was in the nursing home. But we had each other's phone number, and we got him a copy at the nursing home. And he called me, and it's about a minute long, the recording, to thank me for including him. As sick as he was, to say that it was a marvelous book, and that he was learning things from it, from his hospital bed, that he would be utilizing in his next project, which never came to pass. So I have that recording. I'll send it to you. It's sort of, it was a very emotional experience for me, and gratifying to know that someone of his stature at that moment in time had appreciated my work was really important. I have one more question for thinking about the students in the room and other designers who are here tonight. What's one piece of wisdom you'd glean from your experience in your career that you'd want to impart upon someone else? It's heavy, right? Is there something, a student who's here tonight, and you want to tell them one thing about getting into this industry, what would it be?
choose another one.
Is that...
Oh my God.
No, I think it's the most, I mean, I don't know how to do anything else, so I think that's the only thing. I think that, I don't know, I think that all the things that you learned at school are probably the things that are going to be the less useful. I think it's everything that you learn about human relationships is what matters. I think everything else is, I mean, you have to know how to draw, you have to know how to, you know, how the plumbing functions and how, you know, you have to know all those things. But the reality of the business is the relationship with people, whether the people you work for, the people you work with. I think it is essential, and I don't think you don't make mistakes. You make mistakes. And it's just, you know, sometimes the mistakes are you think you'll never get over it and you think you'll die, but but they only, you know, after all, it's as a friend said to me, she said, Robert, it's all about trimmings and tassels. Don't die over that. And it's, you know, it's a very blessed profession because we deal in things that are actually, you know, we deal in the most beautiful part of people's lives, really. And the people who come to us too are incredibly privileged, which makes us privileged as well. So I think that's one thing that you have to keep in mind too, is that the reality of the world we work with is not the reality of the world. And that it's very different universes.
And Ghislaine?
I think that that you have to understand that you're going to be learning things every single day, from day one to whatever day you are presently at, and that you never stop learning. And there is so much information to understand because we deal with so much. I mean, Robert does not deal with closets, but
I do now.
you do now. But, you know, you have to know about that. You have to know about plumbing. You have to know about structure. You have to know about upholstery, how things are trimmed. And I think you just get better and better and better at your craft. And literally every day I learn something. There is not a day that passes that I'm like, oh, okay, nothing new came. You know, there's always something, and you can just keep on getting better and better and better at what you do.
Yeah, and there's one thing also is that you can think about everything on the job site. You can think about everything on the project, everything, and you think the one thing you haven't thought about is going to go wrong.
Yeah.
It's just a law, and it will always happen. And you cover everything. You look at every room, at every drawing, every detail, and you think, now I get it. There's always something that will go wrong.
Oh, yeah, things get screwed up. Even when you have thought of things, it's just there's too many moving parts. You have to be able to pivot and do very well. I am not invited to installation days very often because my team does not like me there because I'm just like, I used to be very good,
like
but now I'm just a mess. So
painting,
I'm better off not. You know, I get too nervous and too, you know, I don't think I'm a help on those days. So I come on day 2 or 3 or whatever it is, and everybody is happier. But it's crazy how much you have to learn and how long it takes. It takes years and years and years and years to become good at this.
Right. So there's this idea that design is not linear. Things happen. There's an up and down, and, you know, people make mistakes. And I think if I were going to say anything after these 40 years I've spent in and around your business, not doing your job, but having owned a curtain workroom and an upholstery factory and all the designing textiles and now doing books, I think Wayne Dwyer, the late self-help guru, once said, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Mm-hmm. And I think that having a constantly curious perspective about how, you know, what's happening in your life. I came to publishing because the economy collapsed in 2008 and I found myself out of work, right? And I was lamenting that for quite a bit of time, and the things, you know, I sort of lost my house and all that. Like many people, I was not unique in that situation. But that idea that if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, was a challenge for me. Okay, what is it that I want to do with my life now? I wanted to go to design school, but I was 50 and bankrupt, and how was I going to pull that off? So to think about it in a different way was, what if instead of going to NICID, which I would have loved to do, or RISD or SCAD, what if I went directly to 100 people, solve the problem in a different way? I think that's so important, right, is to look at things from as many perspectives as you can. Right? You'll be challenged in this work.
And also you have to, I used to think I was the only one who was right. And
You don't ever think that way now?
no, I don't. And I think it's really wonderful also to listen to the people, the person you live with, who has a completely different vision than your own, and to be accepting of that person and that the judgment that, and then you think, it's actually right. And it's really annoying, because it's right there. And, but it's actually very useful, because I look at things in a very different way. I'm, you know, and I think that's the privilege also of, you know, of having seen so much, that I don't hold the truth. I don't, you know.
But I think that's kind of like a little bit of a journey, because I think in some ways you have to get to that point. You have to get to that part of the journey where you don't believe, because you're learning, and then you get to a point, I think, that where you're like, okay, I've got it, and no one else is right, and this is it. And then I think when you've established that and your foundation is really strong, then you can go back again and go, oh, okay, I'm ready to kind of, I think I've established this, and now I'm ready to kind of be more open. So I think for me, it's taken, you know, my process has been so many journeys and different kind of times where I've been more open or less open to other people's opinions, or right now I think I'm really like very, very open to learning so much more.
That journey to get here, right? It's like learning to paint the grisaille first before you get the lapis. And you've both done that, right? And then you get to see what the possibilities are at this point in your career.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think it's just also realizing that it also has to do with an absence of pride. And I think that that's modesty, just to, that, you know, nobody's 100% right or 100% wrong, at least in design. Politically, it's different, but in design, it's, you know, everything is open.
Yeah.
So that was all the questions I had for these two this evening, but I thought I would ask the audience if anybody had a question for either Robert or Ghislaine or all of us.
Yes, we have one here.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Neha. I'm actually, I'm an interior designer, and I'm a graduate student at NICID right now. I'm doing my master's in sustainable interiors. So my question was, like, I'm just curious if the book has any projects that feature sustainable or environmentally friendly design principles. Are there like any specific?
There is, in fact.
What was the
Sustainability, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Vicky Charles at Charles & Company, it's a celebrity's living room, is in the book, and she wrote about the idea of sustainability. She's the only person who touched on that. And actually, when I asked her to be part of the book, she gave me that room and asked to write about that subject, which is sort of most of the time I was trying to figure out with somebody what they were writing about. Yeah.
Well, using antiques is the ultimate sustainability.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, just don't bother the world. Really.
Did you, either of you, incorporate a sense of, are you thinking about, obviously the antiques piece is sustainable for you?
Well, it depends on the client.
I think so. I think it's part and parcel of everything that we do, and that, you know, I mean, we're in a very difficult position sometimes when you're getting a house and there's a lot of demolition that happens. It's awful. It's a very and you know, and you know, makes you so aware of that there aren't great systems set up in with demoing and all the stuff that goes to waste. So you make up for that for sure in using products that you believe in, and just always being curious about what products you feel great about, how things are made. We blacklist products in different companies that we don't think are doing the right thing, and we just refuse to use those companies. But it used to be much harder 10 years ago when you didn't have many products that were environmentally or being created environmentally with environmental consciousness. Now there are, so it definitely opens up. And I have to say that there is antiques for sure, and vintage items, and there's such an interest in that,
and quality.
It all helps, yeah.
If a piece is really quality, well made, and we know it's going to be here for 100 years.
Absolutely.
If the sofa is going to go from your grandparents to your parents and then to you, and it's still structurally sound, that's a sustainable.
But construction today is still unsustainable. And I think I do houses a lot, around the country. It is unsustainable. I think, and I look at it and I think, it would be nice if it would be, but sustainable construction is incredibly expensive. And I think when you do a house where you already have a considerable budget, and then somebody says, well, I want it sustainable, and then you give them the bill, and they say, well, maybe I don't want it so sustainable. It's very, very hard. I mean, you can't be, extreme on your positions because it's a matter of money. And I think if the business made it more sustainable, I think it's something that you would be able to do. But I know that, houses that, I look at them and I think, how could we build things like that?
I know. It's true.
Go ahead.
Hello. When designing and you're giving a client choices and you know that the boldest choice is the right choice, how do you trust your gut but also align with your client's vision, I guess, and know how to push them further?
I'm not sure I often think that my clients have a vision. I think I think that we're the ones with the vision, and then I think that sometimes if you're asking about one individual item and they haven't taken the boldest choice, or I always say, if they choose something and you're unhappy with the choice, it's your own fault. You shouldn't have put it in there as a choice. So that's always I never want to hear about oh, they picked that one. I'm you shouldn't have put it in there. If you didn't want it, don't put it in there. You do 2 choices instead of 4 or whatever, or really feel there's one choice for this right now. I really feel really strongly this is the light fixture we should have in here. So I think I think you can kind of figure out where you want your clients to make some choices, where you don't really mind if it's this chair, or this chair. It's not going to be the end of the world. All of those 3 work. But then in other areas where you just feel I'm not giving you 3 choices for even the layout of this room, because I really, really just know what this room should look like, and this is what I feel. And then let's make some choices on those. And if you hate it, oh my God, I will totally change it. I don't want you ever to have something you don't like. But I think that that comes with experience of trying to, in the beginning it's hard because you don't want to be a bully, and you don't want to be, you don't want to be, a wallflower about it. But that's kind of, you figure out your personality, and you figure out how you present, and you figure out that's the first meeting with a client. You try and figure out who are these people, what do they want, how are you going to work well with them. There's a whole song and a dance, and trying to figure out that it's not that easy.
And you choose your battles. I think it's just, and you choose your battles.
Mm-hmm.
And then you keep your beautiful idea for the next client.
Yeah.
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 Well, I sort of think hiring a designer is like going to the dentist. If you have a cavity on the left side of your mouth and you're insisting that he fill one on the right side, what was the point of going to the dentist, right? People come to you or to designers because you have a certain aesthetic lens they align with in having seen your work before. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, here.
Hi, this
Hi.
is Victoria. I would love to know, like, what would be like for you, like maybe today or in the next 5 years, like the new luxury in homes?
The new luxury homes?
No, what's
Yeah,
new
like-
in luxury?
What would be like el lujo, you know, the luxury in a home? You know, maybe now that options are like infinite, you know, like where your heart be like in 5 years, like new.
It's an interesting question
Yeah.
because I think the world is changing very fast.
Yeah.
And I think there are certain things that probably won't be able to use in a couple of years. And I think it's almost impossible to tell. It's like using silk velvet. You know, silk velvet is something that is produced in 24 inches wide, and it's incredibly expensive, and it stains the minute you look at it. And that's, it's a luxury. I don't know if it will be in 4 years' time. I think, but we don't know, and I don't know what luxury might be. Maybe it's security. Maybe it's things that have nothing to do with design and that ultimate luxury. So I don't know. You know, luxury is also so relative. You know, what do you consider luxury? Is silence luxury? Is comfort luxury? Is beauty luxury? Is something that's necessary? You know, somebody said that the beauty is always what is unnecessary. So I don't know. I think luxury, you don't know what it's going to be. We don't know half of the things that are going to be invented from now into in 5 years' time. We don't know.
And
I think it's maybe also the an element of being able to, you know, some things right now you can't use, some materials you can't use because, you know, the reality of it is that they are, like Robert said, they're going to fade or they're going to get, you know, destroyed by the kids or, you know, stained, or maybe the future is something that you can feel that luxury and then it still be sustainable and easy to clean and all of those things, because those two things in the reality of the world that we live in right now and the way that we design, they don't always go hand in hand. Something that is very luxurious and very beautiful often is not the most practical thing. And I think we often are designing in very practical ways, where we're designing for, you know, kids and families and dogs and cats and, you know, all of those things. So maybe that's a luxury that maybe will be in the future.
I think also that, and that's something that for all of us, you know, work, I think the most important thing is the reality of money. And I think and that's often the greatest limitation, because, you know, what you think is necessary and costs a lot of money isn't something that others might consider as necessary. Mm-hmm. And so money is the one thing that we don't learn at school, but we ought to learn very quickly when we start in business, because the mistakes that you can make are ruinous.
in my first Masterclass book, Tom Shearer, who has a new book out, I love Tom, wrote about luxury and completely turned it on end for me. And I can remark about it. He said that it wasn't about the Sub-Zero refrigerator or the Viking stove or whatever that was. It was about the food you served that was stored in that and the experience of sitting at the table. He talked about having never purchased 1 yard of silk velvet, that what was more important for him was to understand what his vision of what was luxurious, and it was a stucco house on a hill with wooden windows that opened to the sea, and there was fresh air and all of those things, and that was what was luxurious to him, more about the feeling than about the object. And I had not thought about it that way.
Yeah.
So we have just 3 more questions.
Okay.
I wanted to compliment all of you on the fact that in interior design, we have a lot of problems that we go through, and we have a lot of decisions that we make. The reward at the end, when you have a client that's happy, is so incredible that I think that we have one of the best professions to be in because of the joy that we experience through working with our people.
Thank you, Ron.
Bravo, I agree. Oh my God, how amazing is it when the client is just so happy and they keep on like sending you emails saying like, I'm just so happy in our home. You've really made a huge difference. And I'm like, oh my God.
I have a client that we speak frequently, and every time I speak to her, she says, oh, I've just been with you. And I said, what do you mean? And she says, as I walk through my space, I always have you around me.
Oh, nice.
What a compliment. Yeah.
That's
Go ahead.
amazing.
Hi. I have a question around maybe in your experience or opinion, what is an interior design principle that would differentiate a technically good room from an emotionally resonant room?
I would say proportion and balance. Balance in color, balance in shape, balance in and proportion, because I think if you don't understand proportion and you can't see a room and understand why that room is successful, often a room is not successful because the proportions are wrong. And it's a bit of an abstract thing to be able to say, but it's like when you're dressing and you know what silhouette is right for your body. You know, you can wear something and it just looks really crap on you, and you can wear something else and you're like, oh, actually look really good in this, because this is like, you know, I think I often equate things to fashion in your own body, because I think that we all experience that in a way that's a little easier to relate to. But I think getting proportion right is just huge.
And also success is relative.
And what?
Success is relative, because what is successful to you doesn't have to be successful to the next person. And I think that's the one thing about being an interior designer, is that whatever we do is always particular to the person for whom we work. So the person for whom we work can judge, but the others can't really, because they don't know how it happened. So you can't sort of rely on what others say about your work, because it has nothing to do with you. It has all to do with the person you work for. So if that person you work for has a particularly incredibly keen sense of proportions and beauty and everything, then you make this incredibly beautiful room, but it's thanks to them more than thanks to you, you know.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. My name is Ranjit, and I run a lighting design consulting practice predominantly in the Middle East and India. And first of all, a big thanks to you all for sharing your wonderful experience. And I just figured out there is something like this happening, and I love being part of interior design and architectural discussions. So in my practice over the years, I've also kind of figured out that lighting design for me has evolved into more of an experiential design for my clients. And often there's always this tug of war between my interior design friends whom I work with and architects in kind of defining that experience for the client. Because lighting is intangible, and it is the interior or the architecture and the form and the textures that really capture the essence of lighting. So sometimes interior designers do not like that much in me telling them, okay, you know what, that wall could have a textured wall, because when I enter that space to feel the sense of depth, I need my lighting to perform in a certain way, and hence your wallpaper should move out and a texture should come in, you know, to create that depth in a particular corridor, for example. So in such instances, I just wanted to pick your brain on it, throughout your experience, how much of this kind of collaborative work has influenced your decision making in your own practices. I was just giving an example.
I think lighting, I think lighting is very personal too, because, you know, I have clients that immediately, like we work with lighting designers and, you know, they're making this suggestion, the client will say, I hate down lighting. 2, I don't want any, you know, I have clients who are curators and have very large collections, art collections, that they don't want light, you know, pointing straight at it. You know, so I think that different people are looking for different experiences with light, and so I think it is a very sort of collaborative thing. And I don't go into any project starting to, you know, just assuming that this is the way that we do lighting, or this is the way that we incorporate any of these elements. And I think it's a discussion that we have about what you know, what the client wants. So it's not just up to the designer and the architect and the lighting designer. I think it's a much more, you know, we start from scratch every single time, really.
I think it has to do also with what the client, you know, how he considers his artwork. And if it is the most important thing in his life, to just want to be lit. I think it damages the poetry of space, frankly. I think having things overlit, you know, it erases everything. Mm-hmm. I like the sort of, I mean, I grew up with lamps, and so you grow up with lamps, and you have chandeliers and things like that. And so the rooms have sort of areas of shade that are darker than others. And I think it's not to have. And I've done apartments for clients where light was incredibly important. There was, like, you know, I don't know, like a landing strip on the ceiling, and everything was lighted. And it's like, what's the point? I think it sort of ruined the pleasure of discovery. Mm-hmm. I think.
No, but when I look at the space, interior design and lighting cannot be really separated from each other, because each of these disciplines kind of rub on each other in terms of creating that final experience. I'm not putting my focus on a chandelier which is visible, or a piece of light fixture which focuses on art, but I'm more trying to dig deeper into how lighting kind of really becomes a material itself in your crafting of your space, and how that collaboration really has worked for you. For example, now in a space, I'm very three-dimensional, but lighting can bring a whole different experience to that space. For example, now if I have just a pure wall wash there, and it creates a very indirect lighting experience, how I perceive the space will kind of change. Rather than having just downlights, you are giving me a very flat lighting. So on this nuances, how has your design practice or your envisioning of these spaces, has lighting influenced, or is that something that you keep in as a tool for defining your space? I
think, ironically, I think that in the last couple of years, I spent a lot more time, you know, not being that deliberate about the lighting. And I know it sounds a little strange, but and relying much more on sconces and lamps and, you know, more uneven sort of natural lighting, as opposed to this science of, you know, perfect lighting, and which is kind of interesting. I just had so many clients kind of say, I want more atmosphere in the home. I don't want this, you know, I don't want it. Yeah, okay. I don't want this control over the lighting. I want this to be softer and special, and the lighting to feel. And so I've really spent so much time in my last 2 or 3 years just focusing on that and understanding, because it's very, very different to what you're talking about. So, and I think there's probably a really nice middle point there where you have a good combination of the two. I think it's got to be a little bit more relaxed and less, a little bit more spontaneous sometimes. That's sort of what my experience is right now.
Okay, so we just have one last question, and then we're going to do the big giveaway. Go ahead.
Amazing. So, taking into perspective historical structures or rooms or interiors, we can see, for example, like Italian villas or Pompeii lasting to this day. What sort of aspect in your profession and your career, how intentional are you for your work to last generations? Or do you see, well, in a very fast-paced environment that we're in, buildings getting built in 1-2 years, do you see your work being a very like short-term work, or do you see your work outliving, generations?
I don't, but
Well, yours is probably much more so than my work is. I would say, I don't know. I mean, I know that I'm not, I look at my baby pictures, and my mother still has the exact same dining table. It's beautiful chrome and glass table. I see, the same things that are on her. She lives with the same thing. She bought really beautiful stuff and lives with it. But I'm not sure we're living in that world. And as much as I would love to think that the spaces that we create are going to be there forever, I don't mind the idea of, that furniture living in another house and being muddled up, and kind of like, I kind of like that. I don't feel that precious about, in my own home, the one that I've just moved into 3 years ago, I took all the furniture from a previous house, and it all ended up in different rooms, and it feels really wonderful to be able to do that. So I like an element of change personally.
I think the only designs that have lasted are royal designs. I think anything that has to do with normal life has never lasted. There is no furniture left from the 1st century BC. And I don't think furniture is something that is meant to last. I think it has a life the way we do. And I think interiors are a reflection of that. So the interiors that have lasted are royal palaces or princely houses, but they are devoid of natural use. I think they are just there as a testimony of the times that the particularly ruler lived through, and of their power and a reflection of their power. I don't think design today is that way. I think that even the people who are incredibly powerful and incredibly rich don't have a house designed, sadly, to last. Because it's going to be temporary, they're going to sell it because they're going to make a ton of money, and then they're going to move to another house, and the house that they're going to move in is bigger, or whatever. And so, it reflects in the way that houses are built. Houses are built today in very temporary materials. They're not built in materials to last either. So I think, sadly, the idea of perennity is not something that I don't know that we design with today.
Okay, that's a segue. So
Yes.
I brought 2 books.
This is the undergrads.
I'm going to give away one to an undergrad who's here, and we're going to pull that name. Let's see.
And you have to be here to win the book, so if they're not here, you have to pull another name.
Elena Glickman Cohn.
Yay!
Okay.
And now for the grad students.
Sort of Oprah Winfrey-esque. A book for you.
Yes, and you get a book. Hold on, there's one last name in there that won't come out. But
That's the one we'll pick.
Okay, all right, look at
All
that.
right. And this, Jennifer Podhorzer.
Jennifer?
Not here.
Uh-oh. Not
Try again.
here. She's probably studying hard. She's studying hard somewhere.
Right, let's say that. Benjamin Fry.
Benjamin Fry? Benjamin?
Not
No.
here either. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
The
3rd time's a
the
charm.
grad students are very, very busy.
Okay, let's see. So Mia.
Mia, yay!
All
3rd
right,
time's a
okay.
charm.
So
Excellent.
if you 2 could come and see me in the back, I'll sign a copy of the book for you. I should also mention that there are some books for sale here if you're interested in purchasing one. Or if it's easier for you, you can buy a book today and then the Rizzoli bookstore will ship it to you if you want to do it that way. It's up to you. Anyway, thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you both.